What do you do when one of Hollywood's largest action stars comes in for what hold be a simple interview and ends up in the most explosive battle in daytime TV history? Today, we're taking a look at the jaw-dropping moment Arnold Schwarzenegger was literally booted off The View after a utterly brutal battle with Joy Behar that left the whole studio in shocked silence. This was not a debate. This was a full-blown verbal war that brought out the ugly underbelly of celebrity interviews. Before we dive into this amazing tale, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments your thoughts on celebrity interviews gone wrong. The day began like any other at the View Studios. Arnold Schwarzenegger had arrived. Bright and early, every inch the Hollywood legend in his immaculately tailored Navy suit. He was there to publicize his new memoir, and what could have been a simple book promotion was about to become a television history. Joy Behar was in her dressing room studying her research notes with a fervor that her colleague should come to recognize. She had been specially adamant about her disagreements with Arnold's political story, and those close to the show knew she had been rehearsing for weeks. When the camera began to roll, all seemed well. Whoopi Goldberg gantreted Arnold with her usual warmth, and the audience gave him a standing ovation. Huevis flashed the famous smile and sat down at the table. "Arnold, welcome back into The View," Whoopi sighed warmly. "And it's good to have you on the show." "Thank you, Whoopi. It's always a pleasure, Toba on the show," Arnold replied, his Austrian accent giving charm to his response. Sunoni host interrupted next. "So, tell us about this new book. What inspired you to write another memoir?" Arnold leaned forward slightly. "Well, Sonny, after everything I've been through bodybuilding, films, and politics, I felt like I had lessons to impart. Tales of overcoming adversity. Of the strength of having a vision." "That's fascinating," Sarah Hannes commented. "What do you think your greatest challenge was?" "You know, Sarah, people always want me to say it was because of my accent, or that I was an immigrant. But truthfully, my greatest challenge was always myself. Learning to step out of my own way, to have faith in the process." Joy had been abnormally silent during this introduction section, sitting there with a slight smile that refused to quite meet her eyes, tapping her pen against the pages off her notes. The rest of the hosts seemed meta, feel something was on the horizon. Then, the moment of change arrived. Whoopi had just asked Arnold his most proud accomplishment when Joy suddenly leaned forward and cut in. "Arnold, let's discuss your true legacy," Joy said, her words dripping with barely hidden disdain. "You left California in worse condition than when you discovered it. Can you defend writing a book about success when your own political career was such a dazzling failure?" The studio grew quiet. Arnold's smile lingered, but then Herr composed himself. "Joy, I believe you need to verify our facts there. California suffered some of its worst economic woes in history while I was in office." Joy was not giving an inch. She rustled through her papers theatrically. "Oh, I have my facts right here. Arnold, unemployment in California changed from 7.4% when you were sworn into 12.5% when you stepped out. These aren't opinions, these are facts." Arnold's jaw clenched a little. "Joy, you're pulling those facts totally out of context. We were handling a global economic crisis. What you're not saying is that we reformed the workers' compensation system and made California leader in environmental protection." "Environmental protection?" Joy's voice rose incredulously. "This is from a guy who rode Hummers everywhere and lived in a mansion that likely had a larger carbon footprint than many small towns. Is not it somewhat hypocritical?" The other hosts were attempting to chime in, but Joy was on a roll. And Arnold was beginning to exhibit since thought. His patience was fraying. His legendary accent grew thicker. "You know what, Joy?" Arnold stated, his voice still in control, but with a bite. "I think what we have here is someone who is more interested in more drama than to have an actual conversation. I came in here to discuss my book. Here you are trying to play go to politics." Joy's eyes flashed. "What I don't get is how someone can so utterly fail at their job and then proceed to write a book explaining to other people how to succeed. It's a little like taking marriage advice from someone who's been divorced 3 times. That one stung below the belt. Arnold's personal life had been the subject of tabloid gossip for years, and mentioning it was going too far. Arnold's expression turned angry. That's enough, Arnold growled, his voice dropping to a low-pitched rumble. I've been around long enough to recognize that someone is trying to make themselves known by dismantling others. You're welcome to criticize my policies. Fine. But when you beg in attacking my family and my private life, that's where I stop. Joy leaned back with an infuriated smirk. I'm not threatening your family, Arnold. I'm highlighting that perhaps someone how isn't even able to get their own house. In order shouldn't be offering advice to others. It's called taking responsibility. The tension in the studio was palpable. The audience was totally silent, realizing they were seeing something historic. Arnold slowly stood up, his 6'2" statured, dominating. You know what your trouble is, Joy? You spent so long sitting behind this desk throwing rocks at others that too, forgotten how it feels to actually be in the arena. It's easy to criticize when you've never had to mack at tough calls. Joy Wells, intimidated Dado, it's the arena speech. You were a movie star who purchased his way into politics with NAMR recognition and glitzy promises. You expected governing would be as simple as reading lines out of a script. At least I attempted to do some stuff that mattered with my life. Arnold retaliated, his voice growing loud for the first time. At least, I didn't spend my whole career sitting in a chair making fun off people who are actually out there trying to make a change. What have you ever created, Joy? What's your legacy going to be? Other than snarky Mark, Joy's face turned beet red with hunger. My legacy. My legacy is calling out phonies like you who believe they can buy their way into office and then play like they're some sort of pharaoh when they do it all wrong. At least I'm not dishonest about what I do. Arnold Laud, but not so you could notice. Honest? You label putting a guest under a sew with personal attacks honest journalism? Isn't Joy journalism? This is tabloid trash masquerading as serious television. Don't dare to preach to me about journalism, you muscle-bound has-been. Joy snapped back. I've been posing difficult questions because just because you can't stand being clanged doesn't mean I'm going to give you softball questions. Arnold's Z's narrowed perilously, has-been. Let me tell you something. Joy, Eva Don more, in my worst year than you've done in your whole career. Eva created businesses. I've entertained millions of people. I've held public office. What have you done? Except sit here and drip apart people? Joy stood up to match Arnold's tallness, though she was still dwarfed by his presence. You want to talk now what I've done? I've held people like you accountable. I've ensured that the public sees through the span. Behind all the muscles and the movie star smile, you're just an politician who promised everything and delivered nothing. Arnold's fists clenched at his sides. For a moment, it seemed like the situation was about to turn physical. The security guards, tensed, ready to step in. You know what, Joy? Arnold's voice was deadly calm. I think we're through here. I came here to be able to have a civilized conversation regarding my book, but instead I walked into an ambush by someone who was more interested in stirring up conflict than in having a substantial discussion. Joy wasn't going to let him get away with the last word. Oh, now you're the victim. Poor Arnold. Can't take a few tough questions, so he's going to flee. Is this how you dealt with criticism while you were governor? Arnold spun around to confront Joy with an expression that could have melted steel. Never fled from anything in my life, Joy, and neither did I waste my time baiting with folks who are more concerned with making cheap points than solving problems. Joy's reaction was instant and biting. You did it spectacularly badly. At least I'm excellent at what I do. Couldn't even be a successful politician in a state where movie stars get elected practically bidfo. Face it, Arnold. Failed governor attempting to rewrite history? That was the last straw. Arnold's voice fell to a whisper that somehow sounded more menacing than if he had been yelling. You know what, Joy? I've met bullies before. But what I've never experienced is someone who is so essentially bitter and angry that they can't even have a civil conversation with a guest on his own show. That's not strength. That's weakness. Joy's face was white with anger. Get out. Chest pat through clenched teeth. Get out. Off me studio immediately. I don't have to sit there and listen to some washed up action star lecture me on doing my job. Security have Mr. Schwarzenegger removed from the building. The studio broke out in chaos. The other hosts were bellowing over each other as they attempted to restore order. The audience was gasping in shock. Arnold tugged his tie straight and smiled that celebrated smile, but there was no warmth behind it. Don't worry, Joy. I wouldn't want to remain in a place where I'm not wanted. But before I leave, let me leave you with this to think about. You can assail my record. You can challenge my intentions. But at the end of the day, I'll go home knowing that I tried to make a difference in the world. Well, you'll be heading home knowing that you've spent your day attempting to tear up someone apart. As Arnold moved away from the table, something surprising occurred.
How the studio audience,
who had been sitting in silent shock, suddenly came alive in applause. It's not courteous television applause, but real thunderous clapping that reverberated through the studio. A number of individuals in the front row actually got out off their chairs, demonstrating their support for Arnold and their disgust with Joy's actions. Joy's face changed into an even deeper shade of red upon realizing the audience was quite firmly on Arnold's side. Sit down. She growled at the audience. This is not about taking sides. This is about taking people to task. But Arnold came to a halt. The audience reaction appeared to give him a second breath, and he slowly turned around to face Joy. You know what, Joy? I think I'm going to linger a little more. These people came here to watch a show, and it appears like they're having fun. Whoopee attempted desperately to get back in control. Arnold, Joy, let's all just breath you here, and perhaps we can proceed with discussing the book. No, Whoopee, Arnold spoke. Firmly, but not aggressively. I think Joy and I need to wrap this up. She obviously has some things she needs to get off her chest. And I think the audience soaked. To be able to hear both perspectives, Joy was clearly frustrated that her attempt to kick Arnold out had backfired. Fine, if you want to stay and embarrass yourself further, be my guest. But don't expect him to go easy on you just because you're having a tantrum. Arnold chuckled and sat back down completely. Relax now, a tantrum. Joy, I'm the calmest person in this room right now. You're the one who's been shouting and demanding that security remove me. If anyone's having a tantrum, it's you. The comment was so clearly true that even Sarah Haynes couldn't suppress a small smile. Joy saw Wand, gave her a look of withering disdain before returning to Arnold. Let's discuss your film career then, Joy said, obviously attempting to seek new ammunition. You earned millions playing roles, who solved everything through violence. And then you expect people to take you seriously as a politician and writer. Don't. You think there's a disconnect there? Arnold leaned back in his chair, totally in his element now. Joy, I believe you're confusing funty with reality. Those were movies, entertainment. But if you wish to discuss my characters, let's discuss what they truly stood for. They were about never giving up, about fighting for what is right, about offending the innocent. Those are very good values, don't you agree? They were about shooting first and asking questions later, Joy snapped. They were about solving complicated blitz brute violence. That's not leadership. It's just blind action. You know what, Joy? I think you've been watching too many of my films. Arnold added with a smile that elicited another laugh from the crowd. Most of my stars were attempting to save the world, not destroy. It, the Terminator, defended Sarah Connor. Conan battled against Starny. Dutch and Predator was attempting to save his comrades. These were not mindless killers. They were heroes. Joy was not impressed. Heroes. They were cartoon figures with guns, and somehow that made you qualified to run the fifth largest economy in the world. Do you see how absurd this sounds? What sounds absurd to me, Arnold responded, is someone who earns a living speaking about other people's work, criticizing a person who actually produced something. You want to discuss qualifications? What made you qualified to sit behind this desk and judge everyone else? Did you attend journalism school? Did you ever campaign for office? Did you ever establish a business? The question struck home, and Joy's bristling reaction indicated Arnold had struck a nerve. I don't have to campaign for office to know when someone is not doing their job. I don't have to establish your business to know when someone is making poor decisions. That's what critics do, Arnold. We hold people responsible. But there's a difference between constructive criticism and simply tearing opponents down. Arnold replied, "A good critic does not only identify what is wrong, they bring solutions. They attempt to improve things. All I hear from you today is negativity. In personal attacks, where are your solutions, Joy? Where are your solutions for fixing things?" Joy was getting agitated. "My role isn't to solve problems. My role is to identify when people aren't solving them. My role is to ask the hard questions that other people don't ask." "But you're not asking hard questions," Arnold explained, his tone rising slightly. "You're just making accusations and hoping something takes hold. A hard question would be about policy nuances, about certain choices I made and why I made them. What you're doing is just character assassination." The other hosts were attempting to insert themselves into the conversation, but Arnold and Joy were to lock onto one another to notice. Its only host attempted to steer the conversation elsewhere. Arnold and, "Let's discuss your book. What's the big message you want readers to learn?" But Joy wasn't done. "The big message is that if you're wealthy and well-known enough, you can fail upwards and still make people believe you're a sexist. That's the actual message of this book." Arnold's patience was thinning again. "You know what, Joy? I think you're projecting. I think you're speaking about your career, not mine. Because the fact is, I've worked at everything I've done. I didn't inherit my success. I didn't marry into it. I didn't get it given to me because who I knew. I worked for it. Worked for it." Joy's voice was rising. "You worked for it? You were a bodybuilder who happened to get a break and became Ammo V-star, then used the fame to get into politics. That's not work. That's just being in the right place at the right time." Arnold stood up once more, but this time, his movement was more controlled.
Lucky Joy, do you have any idea what it takes to become Mr. Olympia 7 times? Do you know what it took Kesto learn English well enough to become a movie star? Do you know what
It takes towing a gubernatorial election in California, and none of that was luck. It was years of dedication and hard work. Joy stood up to match him. "And what did you do with all that work? You left California in worse shape than you found it. You promised. You couldn't keep. You demonstrated that fame doesn't qualify you to lead." "At least I made an effort," Arnold retorted. "At least I expose myself in an attempt to create a difference. You simply sit here each day and gripe about individuals who are really attempting to create something simple to criticize from the sidelines, Joy. It's a good deal more difficult to actually get in the game." The showdown had hit another boiling point. The audience was fully entertained. Some optimism, yelling encouragement to Arnold, others attempting to get Joy to give in. The tension in the studio was electriconed. Everybody knew they were seeing something that would be discussed for years. Joy's last reply was spoken with venom. "Know what, Arnold? You're right. I do sit here and criticize people. And you know why? Because people like you need to be criticized. People like you think you can coast on your fame and your charming, your movie star smile, and nobody will call you out on your failures. Well, I'm calling you out right now." Arnold's response was swift and devastating. "And I'm calling you out to Joy. I'm calling you out for being a bitter, angry person who has nothing positive to contribute to the world. You're not improving anything. You're just worsening everything. And the worst thing is you. Pure tone, Joy it." End of end. Af Chapter 8. The studio was in a fever pitch. Joy's face was red with anger, and Arnold was standing firm like the action hero he used to be on screen. The other hosts had long abandoned efforts at re-establishing order and were simply sitting in awe as two giants af television fought it out. "You want to talk about enjoying things?" Joy spat back. "You loved being governor so much that you couldn't wait to return to Hollywood? You loved the spotlight? You loved the power? But you certainly didn't love the actual work of governing. That's why you failed." Arnold's laugh was hard and UNFUNNY, failed. "Joy, I balanced a budget. That was $40 billion in the red. I reformed a workers' compensation system that was driving companies out of the state, restored our infrastructure, and turned California into a clean energy leader. If that's failure, I'd regret to see what you think constitutes success." "Success." Joy's voice trembled. "Success is exiting your state with a higher employment rate than when you began. Success is not having to borrow money just to balance the government's budget. Success is not being so unpopular that your own party will not back you. The personal aspect of the attack seemed to unleash something in Arnold. His voice fell to that menacing whisper once more. You know what, Joy? I think we found the real problem here. You're not mad at me for my record as governor? You're mad about your own irrelevance. You're mad that while I was out there making an effort make a difference. You were sitting bend this desk cracking jokes about people who were actually getting things done.
Please.
Joy's eyes were blazing with anger. Irrelevance. You've been on TV longer than you've been political. You've interviewed residents, leaders of the world, Nobel Prize winners. Don't you dare lecture me on relevance. But what have you done with, those interviews? Arnold pushed. What have you achieved? What problems have you resolved? What lives have you bettered? You've had access to all those influential people, and what do you have to show for it? A reputation for being a pest and a career built in controversy. The charge stung Joy like a blow. How dare you? How dare you challenge my career? I've informed the public. I've held politicians accountable. I've given voice to people who don't have a platform. That's more than you ever did as governor. Arnold shook his head sorrowfully. Inform the public. Joy. You don't inform people. You incite them. You don't hold politicians accountable. You just attack them. And you don't give voice to people. You simply echo yourself. There's a distinction between journalists and what you do. What I do. Joy was virtually shouting now. What I do is pose the questions that need to be asked. What I do is ensure that individuals like OHU don't slide out of accountability using smooth talking. What I do is authentic journalism, not the puffed-up pieces the majority of individuals receive. When they appear in these programs, Arnold's reply was appalling in its simple city. No joy. What you do is bully individuals. What you do is attempt to feel important, be bringing other people down. What you do is instigate conflict, where a known is necessary. And what you do is give journalism a bad reputation. The audience is sitting in stunned silence now, hanging on his every word. Even the other hosts appeared awed by the ferocity of the encounter. Joy was shaking with rage with fury, and Arnold was totally unruffled, and this seemed to make him seem all the more menacing. You know what? Joy declared, her tone just suppressed. I don't need to sit here and listen, Tothas. I don't need to be lectured by Someone who believes being in films qualifies him to head of government security. I want him out of here right now. But Arnold had more to say. There you go, Joy. Avoiding the topic when it gets sensitive? Calling security when you can't win Thergumen? Is this how you handle ALIA problems? By trying to silence Senyon who disagrees with you? Joy turned to the security guards who had moved closer to the set. I said, get them out of here. This interview, Icever. Arnold looked at the security guards and then back at Joy. You know what? I'll leave, but not because you're throwing me out. I'll leave because I've said what I did come to say, and I believe that the audience has gotten an idea of what kind of individual you actually are. He began to head away. Button turned back once more. You understand what the actual tragedy of the situation is here, Joy. You could have been tremendous. You possess intelligence. You possess a platform. You possess influence. But rather thanasing those talents to make the world a better place, you used them to make matters worse. And that's something you'll have to live with. Joy's last reaction was sheer venom. Don't you derapity me, Arnold. Don't you dare stand there and pretend you're better than me. You're a failed politician attempting to clean up your reputation with a book tour. I'm a successful broadcaster, was been doing this for decades. We are not the same. Arnold smiled, that infamous smile one last time. You're absolutely right, Joy. We are not the sum, and thank God for that. With that, Arnold Schwarzenegger left the seat off the view, leaving a studio in shows and a host who had just suffered the most brutal verbal takedown in daytime television history. The audience sat in stunned silence as cameras continued to roll, capturing every moment of Joy's humiliation. The other hosts made frantic attempts to restore some sense of normality, but the damage was done. Joy sat at the table, her face surged with anger and embarrassment, while Whoopi attempted to segue to a commercial break. But everyone knew that nothing would ever be the same after this explosive confrontation. Arnold's final words echoed through the studio, Ash disappeared behind the cameras, leaving Joy to face the aftermath of a battle she had started but definitively least. The audience began to murmur among themselves, many of them clearly sympathizing with Arnold and questioning his demeanor. As the show finally bracado commercial, the studio was still charged with tension. Joy sat upright at the table, refusing to recognize the other host's efforts to console her. She had gotten precisely what she had wanted, confrontation that would be the subject of water cooler chatter for years. But she had also gained something she did not anticipate. A wholesale and utter defeat at the hands of someone new who had demonstrated himself to be much stronger than she had expected. The explosive exchange between Arnold Schwarzenegger and Joy Behar had finally come to an end. The shockwaves would ring out for centuries to come. Arnold had been removed from the view. But in doing so, he had revealed Joy Behar to be the bitter, angry individual that many had long assumed her to be. And in doing so, he had delivered one of the most severe takedowns in the history of daytime television. So, what do y'all think about this unbelievable black infant? Have you ever seen a celebrity interview go this wrong? Let me know in the comments below.